Welcome back. Okay. I don't know what we're talking about. What do you want to talk about? How you been?
I've been great. I've had a lot of opportunity to travel, and then I went to Seattle, which was incredible.
I know. I don't know. Not Seattle.
I love Seattle. I love it. So much fun.
Do you love the
They
place or do you love the people?
Little bit of both. I love because I feel like the people really make the place. Like it's beautiful in and of itself, and it's just in a really amazing location. But I feel like I vibe with a lot of the people. Some of the people just take things way too far and way too seriously when it comes to I'm
Anything.
not
Anything.
anything. Yeah. Yeah. Like they get really hardcore on stuff. And I mean, you can say about anywhere in the country, but there's some things I'm like, whoa, I can't subscribe to that. They're like, oh, I was looking for roommates and they're like, I want someone community minded. I'm like, well, what the fuck does that mean? Just basically someone
Thank
who
you.
can like
Thank you.
yeah, it's someone that can, and what they're really looking for is a nice person that's willing to interact with them when they live with them, which is fine. I mean, but community minded is a very weird way to put it.
It's called group sex. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if they just say that, I'd be like, sign me up.
I,
Let's be
I've
roommates immediately.
the people that vibe in the realm of like getting naked in the woods and that type of thing are the ones I could never really vibe with. And they're like, you seem like you're free minded in appearance, but inside you're closed off. I'm like, because I don't fucking I'm not open to just showing my wang out to everybody. I'm sorry about that. I don't care if you do it. But don't ask me to, or don't ask me to
Yeah.
conform. I don't like people that like to conform other people. And even though they might be
Yeah.
anti-fascist, it seems like it's more fascist. You know what I'm saying?
It really, you can go so hard line the other way, like really hard line the other way. It doesn't matter which side of ideals and beliefs you're on. Like you can become very militant about it. But it wasn't even those people. It was just someone asking for a community minded person and someone that doesn't have a lot of smells, like no perfumes, no cleaners. And I'm just like, I found a lot of those kinds of people for roommates. I'm like, wow, this sounds like a miserable person to live with. Like they're going to be the type of person that you go any deviate any way outside of their ideals and beliefs, forget it. Like you're going to be miserable. So, yeah, there was that, but most part like I vibe with a lot of the people, very creative is the big thing. Very creative, very, they're big thinkers. I also like a lot of the composting and recycling that they do, just things like that don't happen in Nashville. So that was pretty great. But I found out they have the largest pinball community in the United States. And I went to a pinball museum. And I remember you asking me, we should talk about pinball on the show.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
all right.
actually perfect. Where did that start? Because I didn't know you were a pinball wizard, basically. Like I've had my own experience with a pinball machine when it comes to
Yeah,
like when I was a kid, I would skate to an old video store, and
right.
this video store when you could actually grab the disc and have to take it home and pray to God your parents weren't home when you wanted to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But
Right.
they had a Lord of the Rings pinball machine, and I really enjoyed playing that. It was something about like the
Yeah.
buttons and then, hearing the clicks and all that type of stuff. It's more classic
Yeah.
vintage, which I'm surprised hasn't like
Hmm.
that. You don't see more stores now or arcades, like physical places to play these old style games, which seems like a great way to capture nostalgia, considering everything's about
Yeah.
nostalgia now.
Yeah, beercades are really becoming a thing. And I don't know if it's because of where you live, it's a little bit smaller, but I'd say there's 8 or 9 here in Nashville and Seattle. I don't even know how many there were, but like there were 2 or 3 within walking radius of where I was at in a small suburb called Ballard, or like a neighborhood of Seattle called Ballard. Um, the Where I go in Nashville is called Game Terminal, and it's in an old industrial area. It's literally in a warehouse. I think they have something like over 100 arcade games that are free, and then 50 plus pinball machines, and it's the largest collection of pinball machines in the U.S. It's I think $1 to play, but I've gotten to the point where I'm getting high enough scores that I'll get the free game almost every other time. So I'm paying for a third of my games, which is great. Yeah, paying for about a third to half of my games. So that's been really fun.
How much are you spending?
Um, so my average when I go in, you can get like 25 tokens for $20, and then I'll get like a Diet Pepsi. But that will last me maybe a couple nights a week. So $40 a week, if that. So
Wait,
it's
how
not too
much is the
bad.
diet? Wait, hold on. My fucking math skills. Hang on a second.
Okay, so
You're paying 20 to 20.
45.
Wait,
Yeah, sorry, 45.
so but how, like you're paying 20 to 25 a game on a day you do it. How many times a day do you do go weekly? That adds up to this four. How much is the Pepsi?
The Pepsi is 250.
Okay.
And I'm in there enough that half the time they're just like, just take it, just take it. But like I can go in for an hour and maybe spend $5. So that I still have, $20 worth of worth of tokens left. So it's still 20 plays. And then again, if I'm paying for half of my plays, I'm getting 40 games out of that. So depending on the week, like I'll go 2 to 5 times. It's kind of like my brain reset. It's my brain cleanse because I can really focus on the game. And everything else, I can just be like, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm practicing, basically. But this whole thing started back in June. Like, this is relatively new. When my friend had her birthday at Game Terminal and I discovered it, and I started going on my own because I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I really like this. I like pinball a lot. Let's go, let's go play just to do something and not because I don't drink. So, the idea of going out to the bar isn't appealing. Like, I want something to do and it's fun and it's relaxing and I just really enjoy it. But yeah, I'll pick out a machine and I'm like, I'm gonna get the high score on that one. And so I work at it, work at it, work at it until I get it. Because I want the high score on a lot of machines. So that's what I do. But there's certain machines that I like. So I've gotten to the point of I can go up to machine and be like, oh, that's a good one because it has some good ramps and, the flippers. There's a whole thing. The flippers aren't too close together. Well, they're not too far apart because if you have ones that are far apart, the ball goes straight down the middle. So that's how you go through games really quickly. And that's how I feel like I get quote unquote cheated the most. But what I love about pinball is it's honest. Like there are games that are rigged. Like if you're doing too well, it'll fuck you up, right? It'll fuck you over. It's like these algorithms are like, nope, you're doing too good. We're gonna, send an enemy you can't defeat, or I'm sure there's lots of things. I'm not a big video gamer, but you can't cheat pinball, not really. It's gravity. You can't cheat gravity. If it hits a bumper, it hits a bumper. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's nothing you can do about that. So that's why I like it. There's so much control and without the game cheating for you, which I love.
Have you ever thought about investing into just getting a pinball machine for your house? Probably that would be cheaper if you count up the number of weeks you probably go and spend how much money. I mean, a pinball machine's what, like 2,000, $1,000?
I think they actually get up to like 3 to 5 now.
Okay.
So, but then that's just one machine, whereas with this, I have 50 plus, or even a small arcade that has 15. So it
But
gives me
this at like
choice.
1 o'clock in the morning, you could just walk downstairs and, play some pinball.
This is true. But again, I would get bored of just the one machine after a while. I'd be like, all right, I've beaten this like 1,000 times. There's no one else to beat my score. So half of it is the competition and that glory almost. What is it? Oh my gosh, there's just the pride of being a top scorer because I'm not that person. I don't get top scores. I don't beat other people in video games. I'm not a gamer. I did not grow up with video games. At best, I had a Game Boy Color, and that was it. My mom refused to let us play video games, which, I don't think I'm the worst for wear because of it. But this feels really good to be able to go somewhere and be like, I can get a top score. I can get free games out of this because I am good enough. But they have pinball tournaments, which I've not participated in, but I'm really considering it. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I have to be careful with like, cause I wanted to get a pool table for my house after like, there's a local laundromat and for a time we didn't have a washer. So I was just going there and washing my clothes and I went across the street to this bar and this bar had a pool table. And I was like, I just play fucking pool. I don't even have to drink or anything. And I have an addictive
Yeah.
personality. So if I do anything, I get super sucked into it to where I can't make it stop. So like when I was a kid, we had a table tennis thing in our garage. I would play ping pong all day long. Like it just wouldn't. And then you could morph it into a pool table if you wanted to, but I just kept it on ping pong and I was in there hours and hours and hours. that's what scares me is like, I don't know what else I want to get invested into. Cause I mean, if you look at the podcast is kind of where I invest my time into. And then when I'm not doing this, I'll be
Mhm.
working out, and I don't, cause necessarily I've let the working out kind of, besides doing 5 or 6 hour cardio days and just regular weightlifting days, I've tried to get back into it, but I've also seen that like now in my mind, I would spend like, for instance, there's people that'll come into my work and then they'll 3 hours, 4 hour workouts. And I'm like, you just don't have shit to do. And I realized, like, yeah,
Right.
my schedule used to just be work and working out. And then I had nothing to
Mhm.
do. So I would stay as long as I possibly could at the gym. And now it's like, oh, I got a podcast, or I got to find guests, or I got to do something like this. And it's
Mhm.
kind of taking a back seat where I'm like, did I really enjoy it, or was I just filling a space? And it's like, yeah, I enjoy working out. I do. I still do love doing it today. But filling a space, like
Right.
what is something where I can look at it where it's not just filling a space? If I play video games, it's filling a space. I just started getting sucked back into that again. I was like,
Mhm.
fuck, I need to like find something. Painting. I'll paint my ass off. I started painting a little bit. I'm getting sucked into that
Yeah.
too. I'm like, all
I
right.
love that. Yeah, I'm with you. I have an addictive personality, and I can say it probably is an addiction by now, but to me, I think there are quote unquote healthy addictions. I mean, anything can be taken to the extreme. Like if going and playing pinball was making it so that I wasn't doing laundry or eating or spending, $20 a night, 7 days a week, that's a problem. I mean, that's a big problem. It's 140 a week times 52. I mean, that gets to be a lot of money. But I'm not doing that, and I'm not going out and drinking, but I still do all of my daily stuff. I still see friends, I'll still eat well. I mean, that it's not affecting my life in a negative way. And it also like because I'm not I'm not interested in dating right now, so that's another thing. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to go on dates, but I want to go out and do something. So might as well just go play some pinball. So I've gotten to know some of the bartenders and the door people, and they always ask me, which machine are you going for tonight? So it feels good because it feels like this kind of weird little community. But yeah, that's my pinball experience. But yes, you're right. I'm the same way. I got to be careful. I just bought a Nintendo Switch, still haven't hooked it up because I'll go out and play pinball instead.
Well, there's like beneficial addictions and there's very, very negative ones. And the negative ones are obviously the ones that are stigmatized across when we think of the word addiction, it's drugs or alcohol. But like I
Right.
can notice like there's
Hmm.
like a black hole in my head that starts to happen when I start playing something. I'm getting truly
Hmm.
wrapped up into it. And like it's weird because the one thing I'm super good at is like carnival games. Like when it comes to the games,
Awesome.
when the game stackers, I want a laptop out of that thing. You need to hit the button and stack all the blocks up to the top. And then any claw machine I've ever
Whoa.
done, I've always won a stuffed animal. No matter if the Sheen has an algorithm set up in a certain way, I always win something. My buddy's like, he didn't
Love
believe
that.
me. And then we went to go like try these games out. He gave me 20 bucks. I
Mhm.
won every single time. He's like, this is fucking intense. Like you're good at a skill that really doesn't matter unless
Yeah.
you're on a date with somebody. And I was like, yeah,
Same.
but here's the thing is I think with my personality, like we go back to what we were talking about off air about getting too high and kind of feeling like you stepped out and you never came back in. I feel like my personality is just different from the normal. And then the normal is how everything is calculated to work with. And then I'm the one that's the outside. And it's like
Yeah.
people will be like, "Are you high?" I'm like, "I'm not high. Why?" And they're like, "You're acting like you're high." I'm like, am I?" Because when I'm high, I'm actually the opposite of this. And they're like, "So you're great for stoners, but you're just off-putting for a lot of normal people." I'm like, is that a compliment or I don't know, but I feel like I got
Right.
sucked out of a system. And then when I got put back in, my personality just doesn't match with their normal. I don't know if it's the energy. I don't know if it's the type of vibe or frequency that I'm on, but it's different. And it links up to these fucking machines where I can beat their ass.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but I'd rather have you be way out of the normal. That is one thing I've always strived for is to never be quote unquote normal. And so when people find out, well, what do you do for hobbies? And I'm like, oh, well, I play a lot of pinball. That's kind of my jam right now, but I just started Krav Maga, which has been a great thing, but it's also dangerous because it's literally down the street from the pinball arcade. So I can go if I have a few minutes to kill before, or like I want to go after, I can do that. So it can be a bit dangerous in that sense. But no, addiction really is defined as you're doing something and it is affecting your life negatively and you can't stop it on your own. And that can be work, that can be drugs and alcohol, that can be people. So there's people, process, and substance addictions, the three of them. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can be addicted to. And again, it just depends on, is something absolutely ruining your life? Like I could go so crazy on the pinball that it does ruin my life. Like it is a possibility, but I have enough things. I think it's a healthy kind of balance where I'm like, sure, I do this a few nights a week, but the alternatives are people be like, what do you do for a hobby? And like all they do is go out and drink, with friends, even if they don't have like a drinking problem. There's just not much substance there. And so this is something I can share with something that's really fun, or with someone that's really fun, and that is enjoyable, and you don't have to be intoxicated. Though, on air, can't believe I'm saying this, but I do like to go really high, and you find that like sweet zone of just focus. Like the best games I've ever had were like where I'm not really high, but I'm not like not high enough. It's just this really nice middle ground. I don't have to go high to enjoy it, but it's like a nice little ritual that I have. Again, on nights that I don't have to adult anymore.
I'd probably be a stoner if I haven't if all my experiences of getting high weren't the worst possible things a human being should experience. Mostly that's from taking too much, like that extra puff or doing something like that when you're not supposed to. But
Right.
it's weird because if you look at the classification of what society would deem as addictions, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit into something, but addictions, for instance, is supposed to be anything that's necessarily bad for your health or bad for you as a person.
Hmm.
Like there can be a functioning crackhead. Okay, Marion Barry is probably the
Hmm.
best version of a functioning crackhead, but it's not necessarily good in the eyes of society. I mean, if you do your job, but I look at it like I think everything's an addiction, but is it an addiction or is it a reliance into something? Like we all can technically be
Yeah.
addicted to food because we all need food to survive. And that's a weird
Right.
thing in its own. Like people, what you're trying to lose weight, so you stop eating, and then now you're not eating enough. And if you eat too much food, you're eating too much. And it's like, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, where's the middle ground? You start to realize like everything's very, very like weird the way it's kind of
Hmm.
scripted or it's kind of put out there where it's kind of hard to just or I guess decide your own decisions based on people say, well, look at this person. Well, look at this person. Well, necessarily you can't look at that person because that's not you. You're a little bit different. And I
Right.
was listening to a podcast where this addictions counselor on Joe Rogan was talking about how addiction, it seems like the one thing that kind of leads down the rabbit hole is when you start to lose an aspect in society, which is religion. Now, I've talked about this multiple times. I'm not religious, but I talked about like with ancient societies, you start to see a
Mhm.
missing element or a misstep. And I think that might be religion because that mysterious belief into something or just wonderment that it might be out of your control kind of either takes pressure off of you or puts pressure onto something else. And with
Hmm.
addiction, for instance, there's a lot of people that are in addiction counseling that are turned to religion, turned to another religious aspect, which is a
Hmm.
great benefit and
Absolutely.
a great tool. But is it religion the cure for it then? Or would it just be, is there something else? Is it just a different mindset or a different perspective view? Because I found that when I start realizing I'm addicted to something, if I look at it as something that has power over me and now I'm no longer in
Hmm.
control, I get pissed off at it and I never want to do it again. Kind of like my
Yeah.
grandma quit smoking cigarettes when the price started going up. And then she was like, I'm not going to pay this. I'm not smoking cigarettes anymore. And she hasn't smoked cigarettes in over 40 years.
Wow. Good for her. That's a hard addiction. That's a really hard addiction to stop is cigarettes. I'd say it's one of the hardest. I think the hardest addiction to have is a food addiction. Absolutely, because like you said, you have to eat. I don't have to drink alcohol. Like alcohol was absolutely ruining my life, so I did have to stop. Because I mean, if I didn't, I was probably gonna die from it sooner rather than later. So I did stop that, and that's when I started smoking weed. Not immediately. I took a good amount of sober time to really evaluate and be like, is this something I can do? So it is something I enjoy a lot more now. And I'm like, why the hell did I ever drink? Like, this is incredible. I remember everything. It just enhances life. I don't like getting too high where I'm uncomfortable and like my head's spinning. It's just a nice, like, oh, this is chill. Not doing it to self medicate. I think that is the biggest thing with anything, not a time filler, but are you self medicating? Are you saying, I've had a really bad day. I'm going to go smoke a blunt, or I'm going to go drink a case of beer or whatever, like, or I deserve this cookie, so I'm gonna eat it and then rest of the pack of the cookies. You know what I mean? Like, to me, as long as you're not using something to self-medicate, it's okay. Some people just really get into those process addictions, but they use it to distract themselves from something that's going on in the rest of their lives. Whether it's to, get away from stressful family situations, or because they're so, I don't know, anxious about other things, or they're super depressed. So they feel they have to have that reward and gratification of hard work, but it really does ruin the rest of their lives. Like, the idea of a functioning addict it seems like a bit of a myth, because once you stop, you realize how not functioning you were. Like, it was bare minimum, pay your bills, do your job, see people on occasion, but your mind was always focused on that. And and some people can function, like, say, drinking all day. I was always a night drinker, so 7 or 8 would come around and I would go get that bottle of wine or two. And if I was really determined, there would be a third that I wouldn't remember, in one night, in a few hours. And I would still go to sleep, wake up, go to work. I'd be miserable, but I would do it. But I would always do it after I've quote unquote adulted, like did laundry, or, did what, clean my room, made dinner, whatever it was. Like, I would always do that, before I drank. But that, again, that was bare minimum. That wasn't, I didn't have any hobbies. That was my hobby. When people would ask, well, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, I don't actually know. I used to have hobbies. I don't remember what they were. And then once I quit drinking, like, I started trying all these new things and expanding my interests. And right now, like I said, it's pinball, and it's a really unique, fun thing. So yeah, addiction is a wild one. And I work in admissions for
Yeah.
addiction centers. So I do speak to people every single day that their addiction looks different than mine. But the one thing we all have in common is we're self-medicating for mental health, as you as a huge advocate for it. But I agree with you. We all have codependency of some sort. We all have something that we rely on to make us feel better. That may not be the healthiest, but we're only human as well.
I was always kind of questioning the essential or the element of marketing death. Death or funerals, coffins used to be sold in Costco. And I
Mhm.
always thought this was crazy because you really start to see that literally if it exists, they can find a way to profit off of it. You know,
Oh,
a
1,000%.
addiction is the same way now that I really start looking into it. Like if you look how a
Mhm.
casino machine is built, it's not just the aspect of gambling, but there's lights, there's different noises, and there's sounds that cause you to react, that
Mhm.
cause you to want to play again just to hear that sound. Certain elemental triggers where I
Oh,
start looking at
pinball.
like, well, when did that start? Did some person just decide to go into an addiction counseling and be like, what caused you to be addicted? Well, there was all these lights and sounds and then they're just like, fuck it, we'll throw it in a machine, and then that's how they get you. Like I just picture a person who makes a casino or makes these gambling games or these apps goes, the best marketing thing that we can do is go to one
Yeah.
of these counseling places, look and see what their addiction to this stuff is, and get a
Yeah.
giant census of
Yeah.
what are they addicted to, and then put it in a game. And the next thing you know,
Yeah.
people are stuck to their fucking phones or they're stuck in a casino all day to where literally I worked
Yeah.
at a casino.
Bright, shiny, flashing lines.
Well,
Yeah.
they had people, that family members, that would call the casino and be like, do not, if you see him, kick him out, he has an addiction problem. And they have these types of programs installed. I'm like, yo,
Mhm.
that's the craziest thing, where you start looking at it like, now you're making it worse, because even though you're banning them from it, it's now you're forbidding them from doing something that's going to cause them to want to do it even fucking more. But now they don't have the opportunity to do
Right.
so. So now they're going to go a town across, and they're going to keep going to different longer
Right.
locations, and it's going to seem even more
Uh,
fucking nuts.
they of the things that addiction makes us do is it's wild. And being on the other side of it, you look back and you're like, that was insane. And these stories I hear, they're absolutely insane. And they're good stories, but not when you're in the middle of them. And I think that is the beautiful part of quote unquote recovery or remission or whatever you want to call it, is looking back and saying, wow, that was wild. I can't believe I did that for this thing. But when you're in addiction, it just seems perfectly logical. But you're right. Like, and with anything, but like with gambling, like you said, if you go into a casino and get banned from it, you have to be ready to stop. And if you're not, yeah, you're going to find a way to gamble regardless. Um, Yeah, it's yeah, addiction's wild. I had a totally point to segue into something else, but uh
Well, the
yeah,
optics
oh,
of how they
gambling.
oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, yeah, yeah, like the bright shiny lights and the sounds, like for giant babies and children were like, ooh, shiny. Like, and you see, I was listening, there's this podcast that I love by Popular Science, and it's the weirdest thing I learned this week, which is right up my alley. It's so good. And they had a marketing, they were talking about sound marketing and how we have these sounds like the Netflix bum bum. And they researched the shit out of this stuff. And so that sound marketing is a real thing. Apparently, Netflix wanted to do the bum bum and then a goat sound after it. So it'd be bum bum. And the creator of the sound, that his 10-year-old daughter said, Dad, that's stupid. Don't do that. So that's how he ended with the bum bum. Or Clinique had for one of their mascaras. Clinique is a very posh makeup brand, very expensive. You're paying like $20 to $25 for this one tube of mascara. Well, they wanted the click to sound a certain way to make it sound expensive, to make it sound more high end. And so these sound marketing is a thing. So same with the casino or the pinball machines. And then you add the lights and the visual to it. So there is a whole science behind it and how we can suck people in and keep them there and spend money, spend money, spend money. I mean, isn't that really what it's about at the end of the day? Is just got to make a profit off of it. So anything we can do to make it appealing, we will.
But yet, even though they all have the same effect to it, everyone kind of experiences the same symptom just with a different product or a different avenue for their
Mm-hmm.
addiction. We all view it the same, or not all view it the same. We all view it differently. For instance, if someone
Mm-hmm.
tells you they have a sex addiction, you're like, you're a fucking creep, or that's your sex addiction, and they kind of laugh at it. Somebody has a gambling addiction, they're seen as a fucking loser. Somebody has an addiction that's in alcohol, they're seen broken. Somebody has an addiction to weed, you kind of like, you're a stoner. What are you talking about? Someone has an addiction to
Right.
some type of hard drug, you're like, stay away from that person for the rest of your life. And I'm like, this is kind of very weird, the
Yeah.
optics of how you can view these types of things, considering they're all the same fucking thing as someone attached to something. And then it's like, but like, it
Mhm.
goes back to the point of addiction. When you say someone is addicted to something, you're labeling them to a point where anything they really say could be a part of their addiction. I necessarily don't think that I think people have more power, more willpower than they think they do. I just don't understand. I think a part of it's probably locked because the feeling of not using this certain thing might the pain might be a little bit more than they can take. And I just think that might
Oh,
just
it's too much.
yeah, but you got it when you're doing
Mhm.
addiction. I went to school for addictions counseling. Now, when you
Mhm.
talk to someone who's addicted, the issue I started noticing was that everyone talks down. You need to talk at a level of like, hey, man, I might not have been addicted to heroin, but you're not fucking, you're still a person. You just have you have some time you got to fucking make up
Yeah,
for now, however long you're addicted to
right.
something. And I think that's like,
Mhm.
it's kind of the world doesn't really set you up not to be addicted to anything because everything from our devices to whatever, everyone's addicted to something. And that's because society
Something
has learned
always.
to profit off of your fucking pain. And that's what's nuts.
That's a good point putting that. Yeah, and it's I mean, it's why and the way I have to explain it to people is when it comes to addiction because it is a survival instinct. That's what happens. The front of our brain is our logical brain, our midbrain is our survival brain. And that's where our dopamine sits. And that's what when we gamble and we win, that dopamine goes up. When we have a cigarette, that dopamine goes up. When we eat something delicious, that or anything really, that dopamine goes up because it's telling your brain, well, that's how you're going to survive this situation. And so when you have a hard day, you're just like, oh, well, your brain says, well, you remember that thing that made you feel really good. You should do that because that's how you're going to survive these icky feelings this day. And suddenly that's all you know how to do. So when you talk to someone about saying, well, you can't drink again, they're freaking out. They don't mean to be, but their brain is freaking out like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to survive without this. How am I going to be able to survive? And that's why it's so powerful. It's nothing to do with willpower being a bad person, but I think the pandemic has done a lot to shed light on addiction and mental health especially, because they've come out a lot more people have come out being more understanding, saying, oh, I see why people have become addicted during the pandemic, or if they had a problem it got worse or they relapse. I mean, our centers are busier than ever, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. Um, so I think that the awareness of it is getting better, but you're right. Like, so for so long, if you went to AA, there was this huge stigma. Like you said, you're broken or you're a fuck up. And if someone's a heroin addict, like, watch out, they're going to steal all your stuff and, screw you over. And I mean, maybe, but maybe not. Like, I just sent a friend to rehab 3 times this summer, and I just picked him up yesterday from the airport, and he seems to be doing really well, and I don't hate him for it, and I feel awful for him, but he wasn't always the nicest to me through this whole thing, but I don't hate him. It is the disease, it is the drugs, it is the alcohol. He struggled with alcohol. It was those things making him the way he was. You take away those things, and most people are wonderful people. I had a friend who was a forensic psychologist say once, sometimes good people do bad things, but that doesn't make you a bad person. And I feel like addicts, we really struggle with that. We really struggle. The underlying root is shame. And we know that once we get sober, we're going to have to deal with all the shit that we were numbing. And that is terrifying. Like, it's like you get sober, and it's just this tidal wave of bullshit that you did. And then all of the stuff that you were self medicating for to begin with, now that's there. So you have a lot that you have to work through, because it is all mental health, and we do some shitty things when we struggle with addiction. I think anyone who says they never did is absolutely lying to themselves, not even to other people. I say, oh, well, my addiction didn't really affect anyone else. It did and it didn't, but it did, and something I had to come to admit and take responsibility for. And that's the other thing. When we struggle with addiction, there's something called king baby syndrome. We're all giant babies when we struggle with addiction. We're toddlers that throw tantrums. Oh, it's the world's fault. Someone else made me do this. Or if the world wasn't this way, I wouldn't have this problem. And it's like, no, you need to take responsibility for yourself. You did choose to use this substance to begin with. However, you didn't choose for it to become a disease, but you can choose to do something about it. Obviously, you have to be ready, like anything else. So addiction is a weird thing to get out of, this like up and down cycle. And like I was saying, we do the ups and the downs, and like when you're using substances, you're not sleeping well, causes anxiety, and then you suddenly have anxiety about your addiction to whatever you're using. So what do? The only thing we know how to do is self-medicate. So then that cycle of anxiety continues, or depression, or whatever it is, and you just get stuck in this feedback loop from hell. And that I think is one of the biggest things about treatment, or getting any sort of help, is breaking out of that cycle and really telling someone, you are worth this, you are worth living, you aren't a bad person. And really trying to convince them of that is one of the hardest things. But once it like clicks, everything else seems to fall into place when they have that self-worth.
But if it sounds so kind of understandable or more realistic, I would say the gambling thing or society finding a way that can make a person be
Mhm.
addicted to something. What happens if I translate that over to algorithms, for instance, and algorithm programming something into a certain thing? For instance, if you're trying to quit smoking a cigarette, it's going to start showing you maybe
Mhm.
addiction counseling because it was able to pick up that you want to quit smoking. But imagine if you
Right.
just say smoking and the algorithm's a little messed up, then it just you're what, a couple weeks after not smoking a cigarette, and this thing is constantly showing you cigarette ads because all you say is, "I wish I could smoke a cigarette. I wish I could smoke a cigarette," and this thing starts showing you
Right.
these types of advertisements for that. So then necessarily there
Mhm.
is someone to blame now, and it's not yourself. It's this concept of this algorithm might be a
Yeah.
little messed up. So I think that this world has a couple things like this that people are starting to notice. It's the reason why there's that Facebook whistleblower that's actually probably
Mhm.
government sanctioned, because she created her Twitter account in October. Then she's verified on the 5th of October. And then she's fucking all over the news and she randomly gets a million something followers after 4 or 5 days. Just
Yeah.
saying, I think that's a little bit of government created sanctions, because what she's saying Mark Zuckerberg's in trouble for is a bill, I think it's like C-230 or
Mhm.
something like that, which allows more censorship, which
Mhm.
is what Mark Zuckerberg is for. So if you're going against somebody, why would you side with the same thing they're in agreement for? You start to realize there's like other shit going on, but it's just the way the headlines are all printing. It's going to cause more censorship if this thing gets passed, and it's going to be an issue for anybody that wants to create content that isn't a giant corporation. So you're going to see mom and pop shops or mom and pop podcasts, all these little side things start to close down. Content is going to be managed through a loophole where you're going to have to start paying people to be able to even produce an episode. That means YouTube can charge you to produce. Leads down this shithole rabbit hole. But I start looking at it like maybe we can use technology in ways such as, is it more possible, or to your liking, do you think it would be, I guess, out of these two options, do you think it would be easier to make a device that can just make you forget the addictive properties of what this drug or whatever thing that you're addicted to made you feel like? Or do you think it would be easier to create a mirror and show you what happens if you take this drug, and then show you 50 years later where it's going to be an older version of yourself, depending on if you took alcohol or cigarettes? If you took cigarettes, your hair is stained with cigarettes or what, all this type of stuff. You take alcohol, maybe you have a bloated liver, maybe you have a yellow skin. I don't know. But do you think which of those two seems more like a better avenue to go down? Because I think there's a process of stopping addiction before it happens, or helping people realize this is what's going to happen. My grandma died of lung cancer, but she smoked cigarettes like almost a pack a day. She knew what she was getting into because when she was born, or when she was an adult and she was a mom, she was smoking cigarettes as a housewife, because that's what happened back then. I don't think people realize how quick the times have changed. So she knew what she was going in for. So I'm curious if you know what the payment is going to be, because no one ever wants to pay the piper when it arrives. But if you know what the piper is going to look like, are you more than happy accepting what you're about to do that's going to lead you to that eventual final image?
I don't think you care. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's why most people start smoking as teenagers. You're invincible. It's never gonna happen to you. You'll be fine. Well, I'll quit. It's gonna be okay. But like when your grandma did start smoking, this was before they knew it caused lung cancer. Like that was just the accepted thing. In fact, it was marketed. If you go back and look at old magazines, it was marketed as good for your health. Doctors would endorse it.
Don't forget, at the beginning of this pandemic, they said smokers are less likely to get, I'm not going to say the rest of it because YouTube will flag it, but that's what they said. It says it won't stick to your lungs. So what do we do? It's what I'm saying. It's still fucking happening today.
I never even heard that. Oh yeah, that's bananas. I mean, maybe that explains it with me. I don't know. I
had every smoker hitting me on the shoulder like, you see that? I'm actually going to be safe. And it's like, no, I don't think that's how it fucking works.
No, because eventually you'll probably get lung cancer and die anyway from that, and it's maybe more painful.
But not from COVID.
I'm not COVID.
Not from COVID.
Not from COVID. But right now, so you get another good 30 years, it maybe, and you'll be fine. No, I mean, there's no right answer for that, but smoking is just bad, period. I don't think there's any excuse to be doing it except you are addicted. And if you can admit that, then, you know, people can't give you shit for it. Like when people are like, did you know that causes lung cancer? I'm like, no, I've only been smoking for like 16 years.
Yeah, but I think you change your tune, and I think we disagree on the fact. I think if you showed a kid who's 14 or 15 years old when they start smoking cigarettes, or whatever age they start smoking cigarettes, if you show them the final image of what they're going to look like, I bet you that'll leave a real fucking impact into what they're going to be.
No, it doesn't.
A young kid, and you say, this is you, and this their teeth fucking falling out, and it's like they're fucking one eye.
The scare you, no, the scare you straight is bullshit. Like I did see that as a kid. I remember a whole like health exhibition, and they had real lungs, and they said, this is what a lung looks like when you smoke, and it's black and tarry and disgusting. And this is a healthy lung. You see the side-by-side pictures of twins.
It's not the same, man. If we improve technology to get to a point if I can have a dream that is so fucking realistic in 20 minutes that feels like 8 years, where afterwards, and if I still think about it now, I'll start to fucking cry, then I think technology can get to a point that it can fucking do that, where it can show you something or make you feel something of like how it's going to feel when you get this old. If you can put on sensors and someone goes to breathe normally, I can breathe fine. But what after 50 years of smoking, this is what your breathing is going to be like. Try and breathe. You can do it with a fucking straw. But if you make that sensation feel so real.
Simulate it. Yeah. Yes. You're saying trying to simulate it, like not just visually, like this is what it looks like, but this is what you actually feel like. Okay. So I see what you're saying. That would be, I would hope amazing. But again, addiction is so strong. You're still going to say, I don't care. I mean, the things people give up, they're like, oh, I OD'd 3 times this month. They don't care. My heart stopped. I don't care. Like, that's how strong that is.
But
But if, like
I
you said,
think
if you can get it before,
yes.
that would be awesome.
That's what I'm
But
saying
that's
is
something
I
like,
think their willpower is stronger than we think, but I think if you catch them early, like a kid smokes his
yeah,
first cigarette and say this is what it's going to feel like when you get to be 50 or 60, then I think that might have a lasting impact. But trying to convince someone when they're 70 years old after they've been doing it for 50 years, they've already understand because they're feeling it already. I'm thinking that slow
right.
the issue is I think it builds up so slowly over time that you get used to every single adjustment, like your back hurting. Eventually, after a year or so of your back hurting
Yeah,
always, you're
it
just
becomes
used to
the
that.
norm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it becomes the norm. And I totally agree. I think cigarettes are a hard one because that is such a no pun intended, but it's a slow burn, if you will. But alcohol, heroin, any of the hard substances, even food, they're very quick. I mean, for a lot of people, I've spoken to people all across the spectrum of, they're finally going to treatment when they're 60, but they've been drinking for 40 years. There are people, 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are like, well, I have fatty liver, so I have to go to rehab now or I'm going to die. It's a lot of it. I'm sure it's genetics, or how young they started, but there's a whole spectrum of it. But yeah, I think the harder substances, the consequences are much earlier. Like, I very rarely talk to a 40-year-old heroin addict. Most of them are in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And no one wants to stay on heroin. That's the one thing. Most alcoholics are assholes. They're like, I'm fine. I can keep drinking. I'll be all right. Or if I go to rehab, then, it'll be okay. I can start drinking again after. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. It just, the toothpaste is out. Can't. But again, that's that overwhelming situation of, oh my God, I can never drink again. How am I going to survive this life? Uh, but oh gosh, it's yeah, you never meet old like heroin addicts, but it's so acute, it's so quick. Like I said, cigarettes are a long time, but like you said, you become the new norm. Like, alcoholics, we say, well, I don't even have hangovers anymore, and it's because we're never actually sober anymore. I drink enough that I would have a drunk over basically, and then kind of go through withdrawal symptoms, and then by the end, by 5, 6 o'clock, I was ready to go again. And I would never have full on hangovers. And that's a wild thing. Most people don't experience that. You have a bottle of wine, you're going to feel like shit the next day. And I got to the point where I wasn't feeling like shit the next day. So that's a very bizarre concept to a lot of people. But even though I was having these awful consequences, crashing my car, putting myself in risky situations, it didn't matter. Like, I wanted to keep drinking. Like, the consequences were awful, and I still was drinking. So you got to find that one motivator to get you to stop. And I spoke with a woman. She got in a drunk driving accident, lost both of her legs, and she kept drinking and kept drinking, kept drinking. And then she did like meth and heroin for a month and then just quit everything. For some reason, those two drugs were enough for her to open her eyes and be like, whoa, I do need to stop. But yeah, losing her limbs weren't enough to stop. She just had to find the right motivation at the right time. It's crazy how our minds work and our brains trick us.
Even saying the technology thing or having that type of style of technology come out, it seems kind of impossible, even though I understand that it's definitely possible. We could definitely do it.
Mm.
Maybe it would be easier to say, then can we suggest a tolerance blocker? If your tolerance is the reason why you keep drinking more and more and more, or keep using more and more because your tolerance
Hmm.
keeps going up, then maybe we can find a way to make sure your tolerance doesn't keep going up. So even the smallest bit
Oh,
won't have a major infraction on your health, but maybe it'll have a way to still
yeah.
get you what you need.
There is actually, there's a couple medications. We don't start them obviously before we have a problem, which maybe we should. But then what's the point? People drink alcohol to feel good. So if it's not going to make you feel, I would say some people drink alcohol, and even I could be put in this camp, like specifically beer. Beer, I love trying new beers. I love tasting it. Some people are like that with wine. Some people are like that with whiskey. They like the taste of it. They enjoy it. But for the most part, people like how alcohol is going to make them feel. So if you give them one of those blockers, most people aren't going to drink. So it's called naltrexone, and it's kind of like Chantix for smoking. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it targets those receptors in your brain and blocks them so that you don't get drunk. You can't get drunk. You can drink through it. So if you are an alcoholic, and I can say this from personal experience, if you are an alcoholic and you are going for that buzz, which is what you're going for, you can drink right through it. You just end up drinking twice as much, which is twice as bad. So there's naltrexone for that. There's Vivitrol for that. For opiates and heroin, it's Subutex or Suboxone, and it has Narcan in it, the naloxone that, if you OD, that's what they use. So it's an opiate, so it soothes those opiate receptors, but the naloxone or Narcan blocks the rest of them. So if you do use, you throw yourself into withdrawals. It is miserable. I can't tell you the experience because I've never done it, but a lot of people who are on this Subutex maintenance, people who like take naloxone or Chantix to quit smoking, it's a way to deter them from using it. So it's good temporarily. And I think there's a lot of discussion in the addiction world on if this is helpful or not, but I'm also a big fan of whatever keeps you sober and thriving and not putting yourself in dangerous situations. I'm all for it. But yeah, that stuff does exist. But I think that's a good point. Maybe if we did start putting people on naloxone who maybe feel like, oh, I'm starting to drink a bit too heavily, I need to cut this out, then naloxone can help with cravings, and it can also block that buzz if you do drink a little bit. So in Europe, that's how they teach alcoholics to drink again in moderation. They can do it through therapy and naloxone. They've really started to explore that avenue. It's been very successful. Whereas here in the States, we're still pretty hardline, like what they call abstinence only, like no, nothing. If you struggle with one thing, you can't have anything else, which I understand because in your brain, again, it's saying, all right, you have this thing. So like saying, I smoke weed, and my brain can say, Karla, that's good, but you know what you really like? And that's why they say it kind of leaves that door open.
Well, a lot of
I've
people
been working.
probably a lot of people
Yeah.
probably don't remember, but at the start of the pandemic, when everything started shutting down, the one thing that
Mm,
did stay open was liquor stores for a certain amount of
liquor
time
stores.
because you couldn't cut people
Hmm.
from alcohol because that's one thing if you withdraw from, you can die from those things. They didn't want the hospital beds to
Right.
be filled up with people who were
Mhm.
suffering from withdrawal when they could use them for COVID
Right.
patients. Now, do you think the reason possibly that maybe some undertones of why it might have some religious aspects to why people get religion is a sense of fate in a way? Because fate's always kind of linked to religion in a little bit of aspects of things when it comes to maybe a higher power or
Hmm.
something you can't see that's causing you to stop taking something. I think my only instance, I'm not addicted to weed like a lot of people are, those high feelings or something, because every single
Hmm.
chance I've had with it has been a bad interaction where it's a sketchy
Sure.
drive deal. You got to meet somebody. The next thing you know, you're in a situation you necessarily don't want to be in. And it's like the same thing with
Yeah.
alcohol. There's plenty of people that have their first day of drinking or their first night they turn 21 have the worst fucking experience in the world where they never want to do it
Yeah.
again. So I start to look at like, is it fate? Is this why people get hooked onto religion? Is this a different aspect of things? Is it depending
Yeah.
on how that situation or how that time or that ebb and flow kind of
Mm,
goes? I don't know if you get locked into back to what we were saying before about slipping out of a system that seems to be set into place. Maybe you
mm,
necessarily are the product, much like Facebook treats you as a product, not a consumer anymore. You're a product. You're
mhm,
selling, you're getting sold to other companies and stuff. Maybe the world
mm.
or the way that business has run has made you the product. And now you're there. I don't know. Is it you start to notice it a little bit more? I'm not thinking like kind of crazy in this aspect of saying that the world might be structured in a way to make you a fucking product or make you a never ending customer. But for some people, they go, the world can't be like that. So I'm wondering, what is that thing that makes me think a little bit differently? Did I not become an alcoholic? Did I do something that has
Mhm.
maybe see clearer? Because it feels like a lot of people are like drugged up and not want to see what's real. I think this kind of came to my
Yeah.
grasp in a way is I watched Joe Rogan speak to a guy named Sanjay Gupta. Now, Sanjay Gupta is a
Mhm.
CNN medical official. If you watch him
Right.
and Joe Rogan confront him about him taking a certain thing and calling it this on CNN, the guy goes, "What? I never even heard of that." He goes, "You see this?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I did hear of that." He goes, "Why do you work for a company that puts out these false lies?" And he goes, "Well, is it though?" He goes, "It's not." And he goes, "Yeah, okay." He goes, "Then why didn't you say anything?" He goes, "I didn't know." He goes, "You don't know about the company that you work at. You're a fucking doctor. You tell me you didn't Google it, you didn't
Right.
search it up, and you start to see the lies start to come out, much like you can see Fauci
Mm.
shaking his hand when Rand Paul was talking about SARS, whatever. You start to
Right.
notice, like, are people waking up now? Like that whole,
Follow the money.
yeah, but that's the
Follow the
you
money.
you
Yeah.
You can say that
It's
though, and I know that, and
everything is about money.
but I know that, you know that, but then other people are still like, it can't be like that. I'm like, is it so twisted to think
Yeah.
that the world has gone from living to now a business profit? It has always been
Yeah.
about business and it's always been about
Yep.
profit. Can you look at that and notice that it might be in more aspects than just a place of work? It's now inflicting
Yeah.
onto your life and now who you are as a person, where you can't live your life without being afraid of something, or you can't live your
Yeah.
life without needing something.
The entire industrial revolution is what brought upon this. We are nothing but consumers. I mean, our whole economy is based on consumption. And not tuberculosis, not the old fashioned version of that. It is all about consumption. And I mean, some places you can't even collect rainwater. You have to rely on the water company to give you water.
Raw milk's
Like, I
illegal.
mean, that's insane. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one. Pasteurization, I'm kind of a fan of, because there's some, ugh, yeah, there's stuff in milk I don't want that's raw milk. But you're right. Like, I think you should have a right to it if you want it. I still think, ugh, yeah, I've just had scientists tell me what's in raw milk, and I'm like, I'm good. But I see what you're saying. Like, same thing. Yeah, you can't collect rainwater. You can't a lot of times generate your own power, live off the grid, whatever. But because they want you hooked, they want you dependent, and that's how they keep you in line. That's exactly, it's about the masses and keeping them in order and making them dependent upon consumption and products. Now the internet, what would we do without the internet? Nobody owns encyclopedias anymore. So it's all about consumerism. Like you said, if you can find a way to charge for it, you will. Look at oxygen bars. They're charging you to breathe. Like, that's insane. Just there's little things like that that if they can charge you for it, they will. They'll find a way to make money off of it. And I think to say that anyone is immune to that is really overestimating humans. There was a thing on NPR about empathy and empathy for the lower classes. And as we gain wealth, we lose our empathy for the people who don't have that. You know, we justify our self-righteousness of, well, I earned this, or, you know, it's their fault that they can't get to this level, which is absolutely not the truth. It's really hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have bootstraps. And they said, Abraham Lincoln was one of the few people in history that we've seen that maintain that empathy. Oh, we talked about that. And I know you have a whole thing about Lincoln. So we have mentioned that. But this idea of the empathy is, it's really fascinating. But if you follow the money, you'll see that it works its way in everywhere. War profiteering. You know, if they made war profiteering illegal, we wouldn't have war. As long as something can be profited off of, it's going to happen, good or bad. So it's what do they say? Money corrupt, like corrupts all or something. Um,
It's about power.
and I
Power
think that I
corrupts,
fully believe
absolutely.
that if someone can exploit someone else to get ahead, then it's going to happen.
I don't know what's just how we just had some technical difficulties. That was weird. I thought your thing shut down and then my thing, I guess, apparently just closed out and Zoom was like update. Okay. But no, it's power corrupts, absolutely is the thing.
That's the one. Thank you. Yeah.
Which money is
Yeah.
technically power. I mean, if you have money, you can do whatever the hell
Yeah.
you want. Get the VIP section at a strip club
Exactly.
if you want it. But it's just it's
I love that that's your definition of being like a money baller, is you're like VIP section
I've never been to a
strip
strip
club.
club, but that's everything in Grand
I
Theft
haven't
Auto.
either.
Yeah. I have I don't like I don't do you wait, hold on a second. Do you have a filter on your eyebrows?
No,
When you
why?
watch this video on YouTube, you're gonna see it as you laugh away, your eyebrows stay floating, and then they just go. It's so fucking. I am tripping balls, dude.
I, I have a very expressive face. Yeah,
Oh
the
my God, like you just missed it a minute ago. Like your eyebrows were like above, like you know, in a cartoon where they just float above the. Back to the discussion
yeah.
thing though, but I think there is a key point
Oh
when
good.
people start really kind of noticing, like, are you necessarily addicted to something? Like, I've been spending less and less time on social media, and I kind of actually really enjoy it, only because I thought this thing
Mhm.
was like a necessity in a lot of ways, and you kind of realize it goes away once you truly stop letting it kind of run your
Yeah.
shit. It's a horrible couple of days, but like, I didn't give a shit that Instagram and Facebook went down, but everyone else was caring so much, and it was like, I'm still going
I
to.
had no idea.
Yeah, so
No
I'm
clue.
like, it's like with politics too. Like, do any of these things that happen, they're things that are going to affect you probably in the long run, sure, but are they choosing if you go to work every single day? Are they choosing who you want to be friends with? Are they choosing who you want to make a relationship with? Are they choosing how you're going to pay your bills? Necessarily no. And I think a lot of people look at it like some people get really invested into it. I fucking love it. I'm consumed by politics, but I like pointing out the fuckery
Yeah.
that goes along because I can see why they do
God.
it, because it's all about profiting and you don't care about
It
people, so it
is.
only makes sense.
No. Yeah, even the people who go, and this is so heartbreaking, even the people that go in with the best of intentions, I think, they they go in with the best of intentions and like, I'm gonna really clean this place up, or I'm gonna drain the swamp, or any of it, whatever language they choose of, I'm gonna go clean up Washington. They get there, and I think they're so overwhelmed and inundated with lobbyists and money and the cliques and old boys club and stuff like that, that it's almost impossible not to go along with it. So it's heartbreaking because I do think there are a lot of good intentions, but money corrupts everybody. Like, it's too tempting. Like, ooh, this shiny thing, even though I don't really need it. Like, I get it. Um, and back to your point of like social media, I didn't even know Facebook or Instagram was down because I have presences on most platforms, but I almost never use them unless I get a random update that my sister or my mom posted something, and maybe I'll go check it out. But I think a lot of times for people, it's FOMO, that fear of missing out. What if someone posts something really important? Like, I'll find out one of my friends had a kid 2 years ago. I'm like, oh, I don't know that happened because I don't check Facebook. Obviously, it doesn't matter to me that much if I'm not directly speaking with them to know that. So it is freeing, but I see where we get addicted to social media because when, excuse me, it's that validation. When we post something and we get a like, we get that dopamine boost that, ooh, like even if it's small, like, ooh, someone like that, ooh, someone like that. And you get like 70 likes or whatever. And you're like, oh, wow, that's 70 people that really care. And that's 70 little dopamine bursts. And that's how people get really addicted to it.
Is that your
Sorry, that's
cat?
my automatic cat feed. That's my automatic
Oh,
cat feeder. He's a little
fucking
fatty.
money bags over here, aren't you?
I had to invest in it because he was overweight, so I have to like schedule out his feeding. So yeah, it's social media can be very addictive, and I see why. And it is very freeing when you finally step off of it or get away from it and don't invest a lot of time in it. Because I wonder how people have so much time to scroll through Twitter the way that they do, or to be so active on Instagram. Or is it that, or am I lazy? Because I'm like, oh, it'd be really nice to share this photo with people, but then I have to make a post and I might have to want to put hashtags. I'm
I
like,
don't
ah,
I don't
fuck it.
I don't think you're lazy. I think you're kind of like this where we can kind of relate a lot is like I think we just don't care too much about the whole platform of social media. I think we more prefer like if we're going to invest time into something, it'd be like something to actually do something, which is like playing
Mhm.
pinball or doing some type of
Yeah.
thing that's actually like a fun to us. To a lot of people, their pinball is social media. They like the bouncing and the lights and the sounds and all that
Yeah.
type of stuff. It's very, very soothing to them. I just think
Mhm.
it's like we probably it's like before the age of the internet. Now I'm not old enough to really
Mhm.
experience what the full realm without the internet really was. I'm only 23,
Mhm.
but I still know like I didn't have a whole internet as everybody did when it first came out. I had was a little bit later to it. So like when kids
Right.
were my age having cell phones or 15 or 14 whatever having cell phones, I didn't really have a full on device to use all the bobs and whatevers that everyone else did.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed like skating and I enjoyed a bunch of other things too. And it's
Mhm.
freeing to kind of just disconnect from away. Like I can understand why people want to go live out in the mountains and
Yeah.
have fun, but then I'm starting to wonder when that's truly going to encroach upon those activities because they have trees that are Wi-Fi towers. So I'm like, I mean, they're just disguised up to look like a tree at times too. It's like a way of just getting internet in the middle of the
Wow.
country. I'm like, why do you need that though? The movie Daddy's
Right.
Home too. I don't know if you've ever seen it with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell.
Mm-mm.
Well, they're going out
Uh-uh.
and cutting a Christmas tree for the family, and Will Ferrell's all upset because Mark Wahlberg pissed him off. And he goes over to a tree. He's, I'm going to cut this. Watch this. I'm going to go in a nice sideways cut. And he goes to cut it, gets shocked, and flies back. And it cut down a cell phone tower. Those little things, they disguise them up to look like trees. You couldn't even
Yeah.
tell, but they're there. It's just you don't see it because all the really buttons and lights are at the top, and it looks like a tree,
Right.
but it's still there. And once you let that necessity in there, it doesn't matter if you don't want to use it, but it's going to be there. But it's like, why does it need to be there? Next thing you know, everywhere you go, if it doesn't have it, it's going to be fucking weird. If you go to a business and
Yeah.
say, you guys don't have internet? No, we don't
It's
have
weird.
internet. It's weird.
We are forced to use it like so many times with, I mean, think about so many things now. If you don't have that app, you can't, pay a bill, or you can't, sign up for this. Like, you have to have the internet now. And I think that's where a lot of like rural communities actually get fucked over, and really kind of move ideologically the way they do, because well, they don't have internet, or they don't have good internet, or they have to have satellite internet, or whatever. I mean, there's I heard stories of like ranchers and farmers that run their business from home, and they have, their land and doing what they do, and they're like, I can't even make invoices online to send to my customers or buyers or whoever, because I don't have internet, or cell phone internet even. So these things are important, and also like disguising it as a tree, because it's not pretty, like visually it's not nice. So if it doesn't look good, we don't want to put it out there. More marketing, to make this acceptable to be putting in the middle of nature. So there's a whole reason behind all of it. Now I am, if we are going to be forced to rely on internet, I'm a fan of making sure that everybody gets it, because that is what now will spread equality, having
No,
the
no,
access to
no.
information.
Only the corporate elites get the internet. The rest of the peasants like us don't get internet.
I think no, I wouldn't be okay with that, because I gotta, when I get in those arguments with people, the bar arguments as they call them. Before, when you didn't have Google, you just had to like argue it out and hope that you could go home and look it up in encyclopedia if you remember. Now we can just pull out our phones and Google it and be like, you're wrong. I like
Just
to
like
Google
we
random
Googled
stuff
about
like that.
Abraham Lincoln.
Exactly. So, well, that you get a lot of stuff about. But yeah, there's those weird things that, I want to know the answer to. But yeah, without social media, I think I would be totally fine, because I know who I want to talk to. I know what kind of I have my little tribe.
But how do you know if you never go out past your state to experience who those other people might be?
I think that is up to the individual.
I
But
don't think in a
most
billion
people,
years you would have came to Ocean City, so then we would have never had an interaction.
that's true. But I can say that with billions of other people.
Because I'm never
It
going to
was
Tennessee, so
It's yeah, I don't blame you. It's okay. It's a beautiful place, but yeah, it's an interesting place. I tell you though, if you had told me I was going to live in the South 5 years ago, I would have told you to go fuck right off. Like, it ain't happening. Yet here I am, and trying to make the best of it and finding some wonderful things about this place. So,
I was thinking about
and
moving
a
to
lot of
Indiana, but
empathy.
Tennessee is just it's a meat place. I don't like meat. So I mean I'll eat it, sure, but I just not my primary focus. So I have no
Yeah.
aspect to want to move there. There's not a point for me besides
Uh,
going to see the
if
Temple of
you
Athena.
Well, oh gosh, the Parthenon is amazing. No, in Nashville, there's a lot of vegan restaurants, believe it or not. I mean, it's a
I don't
food
want to eat
city.
that either. I don't want to eat that either. I want
You
fish. That's all I
you
want,
you would be
fish.
fine. Oh, yeah. You're gonna get a lot of catfish.
Ah, fuck that shit. That just sounds exhausting.
Bottom feeders, all the bottom feeders. I'm not a fan of
You
catfish either.
can't eat bottom
But
feeders. Like people go, I want a nice flounder. I'm like, you're gonna get sick possibly if you eat that because they're bottom dwellers. They just eat that scum off the bottom. There's more people that get food poisoning from flounder and the lower bottom dweller styles of fish rather than if you get like tilapia or something that rise higher to the surface. But then here's the weird twist to it.
really,
Here's the weird twist to it.
uh-huh.
With that with the bottom dwellers. Also, bottom dwellers have less minerals and iron and all these types of stuff in their blood compared to the ones that go at the top of the
Uh,
surface because of oils and these types of things that get released into our oceans that pollute and ruin these lakes and shit.
uh,
That's all from the top upper
yeah.
class because it sinks down, but it doesn't go to the flat layer. People think it sinks all the way down to the bottom.
Right.
No, if you spill oil or gas into the bay, when I did jet skis, you would put
Uh,
soap on top of it and it would drop it immediately because it needs something to bond
huh.
onto to drop it, but it mostly floats to the
Okay.
top.
Interesting. I
That's
did not
also
know that.
illegal, what I just said too. So,
I heard nothing. No, it's not hey, just because it's illegal doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? As we very well know. But yeah, no, don't if you're a big fan of fish, you can find some decent fish here, but it's expensive. No, that was the beautiful thing about Seattle. Like I'm not a big fish person. I mean, I'm from Denver, so again, fresh fish is few and far between unless it's fresh water, which is disgusting. Like fuck trout, no thank you. But going to Seattle, all of the seafood was incredible. The raw oysters and how fresh they were, and I loved it so much. I love shellfish. I love seafood, just not fish that much. So yeah, that was the nice thing about living or being on the coast is just how incredibly fresh and cheap all of it was. So it's if you were to move, what would you say is going to be the biggest dictator? Like, is it going to be weather? Is it going to be cost of living? Is it going to be food that's available? Arts, music, like weather is a big is a big factor for me moving. I'm like, I hate the cold. I hate snow. I really would never want to move to a northern city, except for the fact that they have really great arts and culture and diversity. Going to the coast, I have the great shellfish. If I move to Chicago, I have the wonderful meat. So, like, there's so many things that dictate, I think, our choices, at least for me. I don't know if that's you. If you were to point out a place in the country and be like, I want to move there, or the world even, what would be your biggest motivator or drive if you could
people,
choose any city? People?
fuck people,
So wait, you're saying you would move because of people or to get away from people?
away from people.
So you'd go rural.
I would go into like a log cabin in the woods and not be around anybody. As long as I can get to a gym facility or I can get somewhere around 30 minutes of a
Uh-huh.
drive, I'd rather just be like country, nobody around me, only because it's cheaper. It's always cheaper. I'm going where the money is. And if it's
Yeah.
cheaper and they go, well, there's not that much around there. Like Indiana, for instance, is like $400 a month. I found a place, a 1 bedroom place with a 1 bathroom. That's all I need. That's
Wow.
$2,000 where I live. 2 grand. So I'm like,
Right.
what is the aspect? Well, my town is a tourist town. It's got a beachfront. It's all this type of stuff. This is what
Yeah.
raises the price up. But I don't use
Mm-hmm.
any of that shit. So I'm like, all I
There you
do
go.
is I do what I do, which is just hobbies and just go. I can get fun from the environment, not by a beach. I can get fun from the environment when I just go in my backyard and look at fucking trees. I'll plant a
Yeah.
tree. That's what, $60? And I just wait like 10 years. It's payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and I feel I'm kind of the same way. Like I will never ever ever move to the suburbs. I hate the suburbs with a fiery passion. I either want to be in the middle of the city or out in the middle of nowhere, like in a cute little cottage where I can do my gardening and have my little like bubble and my little hobbies. But like you said, close enough to somewhere like a city where you can go and enjoy what a city has to offer, like good restaurants or theater or live music. I think that the Northeast has set that up really well, because the towns, for the most part, are like on hills that are about 10 minutes away. And that was set up by the Puritans and early Christians so that you weren't too far from any church or Christian center and you couldn't isolate yourself. So it's pretty easy to go away from those areas, get into somewhere that's rural and kind of secluded and private, or be really close to a great city. So I think that that compromise is awesome.
Oh, you're the one I heard the nun thing from. That's who it was. I was trying to figure it out for like
Oh,
the
cut off
past,
your
like,
nose to spite your face.
yeah. I was fucking trying to figure that out for like at least 100 episodes now. I was like, yeah, okay, that's where it came from. Um,
Yep.
but I mean, I like people, I really do, but I don't necessarily want to be around them. And I think that
Right.
like I'll talk to people for sure at a store. I'm friendly as hell. But I just when I look at like in my own like private type thing, I like the seclusion. I like the isolation. I'm more of
Yeah.
a hermit in thought, and I think I'm also more of a hermit in person as well too. Because man,
It's exhausting being around people.
Well, they say a sign of a healthy person is someone that actually is distant from a lot of people because that means they're okay mentally and starts to see the flaws around in society. Now, you can
Yeah.
twist that around to be the opposite way too, that you might be a seclusion because you are different and you are weird. It kind of depends on how you look at it, but I
Hmm.
look at it like, man, if I can mentally keep myself well, to a point where I don't really need to really sustain or be around people 24/7, like a constant need for that. And I'm like, this is why I'm afraid of like
Hmm.
major cities is where the most tension is because there's more people in there. And I mean, you necessarily can't even get along
Hmm.
with the people that you choose to marry and live with because it ends up like you guys, it's so hard to deal with anything but yourself. And even at times now in society, it's even hard to deal with your fucking self. Like that's where we start seeing this
Yeah.
kind of thing that starts to happen where there's like a balance. And I think this is when I go back to the business profiting over pain of people. It's taken the balance out of people's lives by making it very, very difficult. Like taxes go up or something goes up or price of living goes up. And then government's
Hmm.
funding some type of
Yeah.
project or some type of side thing where you're looking at it like instead of trying to work on like foreign influences and being above other foreign countries, why don't you work on fixing the country that you are taking care of, which is the people that are making you
Right.
money? Like,
Minimum wage.
well, back in
Yeah,
the day was
exactly.
about
You take.
making well, back in the day was about making your village happy so they're more productive. Now it's about making
Mhm.
costs so damn high to make them more productive, which doesn't incentivize good work.
No, that's the thing. You take care of your workers will take care of you. It's been proven throughout our modern age. Again, we're talking industrial revolution plus, because that's where the 5-day work week, 8-hour day came from, labor unions, because people were being so exploited. They weren't making minimum or living wages. They were working these god awful long days under really awful work conditions. And the second that they start paying people a little bit more, better work conditions, their profits go up, because they're getting more work out of people, out of the workers that they have. So that's the other thing. A livable minimum wage is so important. And our minimum wage has not, I think it's still $7 in Tennessee. Like if you were to try and live in Nashville on $7 an hour, you are fucked. You are living with five other people in a one-bedroom house. Like it's ridiculous. And it's absolutely egregious. It's just not okay. And if we were to raise that minimum wage, like think about the purchase power we have. I don't think people really get that math. Like, all right, suddenly you're making $20 an hour and you are spending all of your seven on rent, well, that's another $13 to go towards buying shit. So that's the same thing with like forgiving student loans. If you're paying $500 a month in student loans and you have, we'll say 100 million people paying student loans, that is $500 a month times 12 times 100 million. That wipes out that debt immediately. It's crazy. Millennials could buy houses, could buy better cars. Like we are consumers. They really target us hard. We're getting good jobs now. The market is doing better. We're actually able to use our degrees. I mean, but when you have that debt constantly, that cyclical debt, nobody's really winning. The banks winning because of that interest, but everyone else, like it's just mind blowing. Like someone put it was like why trickle down economics doesn't work. I had a professor say this. It was brilliant. Bill Gates can buy a pair of pants for every day for the rest of his life. Never has to wear the same pair of pants again, right? He can afford that. But that's only, I don't know, 5,000 pairs of pants. However, every single person in this country needs to wear pants. So that's what, 350 million pairs of pants. And imagine how many pairs of pants we actually own. That purchasing power is so much stronger than what the wealthy can do, because eventually they're going to stop buying those pants because they don't need them. So and that's the same thing with labor too. That's why capitalists, these big corporations are so scared of us, the peasants, because when we do come together, our power is overwhelming. So that's why they are very much pushing us into these consumer positions and making us feel like individuals, like, well, if you're an individual, you are special and you have power as an individual. And
What
and
about
that's
good
why
capitalism? There's good capitalism.
I think there is too. I think, and I call it regulated capitalism. That's what it has to be, because you will try and get away with whatever the fuck you can if it means you're going to get a profit, which is where I think regulated capitalism is really important to say, look, you have to treat people a certain way, you have to do this, you have to do it by the book, and it has to be above board. I agree, there are phenomenal capitalists out there that, yeah, they want to make as much money as possible, but not at the detriment of other people. I think that's really important, is that you're not fucking over other people, because again, a lot, and we're getting to a point, I think, especially millennials, where we are buying more ethically, or trying to. Like, there's a reason we don't go out to Applebee's and Chili's. Like, we want to go to the mom and pops, the local independent places, to support them, because they're probably not fucking over their employees nearly as much. And you want to support people in your community, because the big corporations aren't, they're not helping anyone. They're, for the most part, there are some out there that are wonderful, great benefits, you know, they do exist. But there's a reason we're supporting more local independent places, and it's that ethical capitalism.
You're telling me when Walmart puts a happy face sticker on my shoulder that I'm not feeling loved by them? I'm feeling great.
Yeah, no, you are very loved, especially if you open up their wallet and buy all the shit you don't need made by slave labor.
Dave,
Yeah.
what are we talking about? Slave labor. What are you buying that's slave labor?
All the products that are made there,
The
or made for
produce?
them. Yeah. Do you know how much they pay farm workers to pick that produce? It's
Uh,
egregiously low, and it is back-breaking labor.
if that's egregiously low, then they're getting paid more than me. Then I must be fucking paid horrible wages.
We're talking a dollar 50 a day.
'Cause the fishermen
Yeah,
down here
it's
get
bad.
paid a lot of money to do what they do. Because I mean, that might just be my
Yeah,
town, but unless you're buying
yeah,
like fucking
yeah,
cheap clothing, I guess it could be slave labor. But I don't think when
yeah.
I
No,
buy
the
a head of
produce in our
cabbage.
grocery stores. No, the produce in the grocery stores are picked by people making a dollar an hour. It's bananas. I listened to a whole episode about this, about immigration and immigration visas here in the US back in like the 60s, 70s, for workers coming from Central America, specifically Mexico, where they could come in for a season, do work on the farm, again, this backbreaking labor, and then they would go back to Mexico and live, you know, for the rest of the year, and they could live off of those wages, even if they were incredibly low, because the cost of living was so much lower there. Well, we stopped that, and that's where we got a lot of quote unquote illegal immigration, or undocumented people coming in, because it was harder to come in, but they still needed those wages. It's a whole thing. But if you, and the thing is, if we could pay a much more living wage to those people, our head of cabbage would go up about 5 cents. That's all it takes. Because they're like,
It's
that's
gone
how
up
companies scare you.
49 cents. I don't think a lot of people have noticed. It went from, at least I think it was 90 cents a pound or whatever it was, to now it's 149. I've noticed all this shit because I eat this every day. Everything
Yeah.
has gone up. The tuna has gone up. Everything that used to be cheap as
Right.
hell. And I've refused to buy a lot of these things because
Yeah.
they've gone up by 40 or 30 cents. It's not like I'm making a
Yeah.
big
And
stand,
it's,
but it's slow crawls.
well, but it's not, that's where they scare you. Like, oh, well, if we pay people more, it's gonna send the prices through the roof. And I'm like, yeah, but people could afford it. But what's making it go up is the cost of transportation and the supply chain being absolutely fucked right now. It is so
Do
bad.
you think it's also another factor is it's like it might be easier to live to get paid that much is why they might be doing it as well too. Like for instance, like if the price I make wouldn't be enough to sustain my own place, I'd have to live with someone, and luckily
Right.
my rent's not too expensive, so I can't afford to
Hmm.
live where I live. I could just find a better job as well too that would pay more. But I think also another aspect to add in is that part of taking advantage of people, and that's kind of how the world works in a way. If I go to
Yeah.
Jamaica
Mm.
to try and even get a job or something like that, or try and figure something out, I probably would end up being sold to trafficking, or I would probably end up buying
Yeah.
drugs and they'd undersell me, or they do something like that that would
Mhm.
probably not work for me, and I'd be taken advantage of because I don't know the custom of the idea of what it is. I think this, like, we start looking at the word like systematic and like the issues that goes on
Mhm.
along with the industry. I just think a lot of it is they cut corners on things. I don't think they're being held responsible for the corners that they cut,
No,
you know. And I think people,
absolutely not.
well, people specifically Seattle look for an aspect that it might just be a problem with the consumers not like doing anything about it. And it's like, well, necessarily it might not be the consumer's fault of buying a product. You know, I see so many videos, and I've
Yeah.
encountered this at my own store, where someone goes and buys something. You don't know what that product's made from. You know, you're incentivized, and they're going at it
Yeah.
like, but
It's not our fault.
that's the,
Yeah.
yes,
We
but
need to hold the corporations responsible.
that's, yes, that's my point. And that's where it kind of can be misled with a lot of these things, is that they're
Mhm.
good movements to want to change. But the aspect is you're targeting the wrong fucking people. Like, you're targeting the people that you should be arming up with to go against the giant
Yeah.
corporations.
Well, that's the corporations doing it though. It's a diversion. Like the average person recycling, all for it. We absolutely should. But it doesn't matter, honestly, if we recycle, if we don't get the corporations to stop making the fucking messes in the first
It's
place.
a
If we don't
dirty
get them making
world.
ethical, exactly, and it shouldn't be this dirty. But again, they're making money off of these cutting these corners, and that's what the bottom line is about: is how much money can I make by cutting these tiny little corners. But because they're so big, they affect the entire world, and it's not okay. But we still keep buying shit because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And we're told that we can't live without it.
Everybody listening, cut up your credit cards, throw your car keys down the
Yeah.
sewer. Do not incentivize any more of this.
Right. I don't know if you ever watched the show The Good Place, and I think they put it really well. Like, the hell was getting overfilled with so the show, for people who don't know, as this woman dies and she goes to heaven, quote unquote, only to find out it's spoilers,
Spoiler
it's
alert.
hell. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's a good show anyway. So we find out it's really hell. And the reason she went to hell is she wasn't a good person. But they're starting to realize, like, there was this philosopher who was a great guy, really nice guy, but his indecisions like got himself killed or got someone else killed or something. So he's in hell. But overall, he's a good person, and all these people are good people. But what makes them bad is a lot of times their choices. So you think you're buying organic or non-GMO or fair trade, but then you find somewhere in this little globalization process that it was slave labor, or someone died to have this, or the entire rainforest was killed in their area to get this product. And you don't know it. It's accidental. Like, you can't be that conscious and aware of everything you do, of every single product you buy. It would be overwhelming, and that's the only thing we'd be spending our time on. So if we can hold these corporations accountable and actually have oversight at a higher level, that is someone's job and not the consumer's job, that's where things start to get better. But again, corporations have money. They have a lot of money, and we as individuals cannot come together anymore. And I really do think this is because of social media. We cannot come together anymore to do anything truly effective.
I
Yeah, and
think
they scare us.
we need another Rage Against the Machine monk to do what he did on that cover album.
You might have to explain that to me. What do you mean?
On, you know, Rage Against the Machine,
Right.
on one of their albums is a person on fire. That is a
Uh-huh.
real fucking person
Oh,
who drenched himself in
self-immolation.
gasoline, and he sat down and prayed and lit himself on fire, and he just let himself burn up in front of a bunch of people to make a statement. The way that the media spun that was that it was a psychopath that was brainwashed to think this type of thing and have
Hmm.
this distorted perception. And instead of what it really was possibly a person that was taking a stand. So I'm not saying incentivize lighting yourself on fire, but making a giant
No.
statement big enough that can actually affect some change is kind of the whole point and essence of
Yes.
its being.
Exactly, but we do have to come together to do it. Now, granted, self-immolation, that's an incredible and wild thing to do, but
Didn't break
if
his
we all
vow of
start
silence either. That's the crazy thing.
wow. Yeah, that's on a whole other level. But what we need to do is start hitting them in the wallet, because that's what they want. So when you start hitting these people in the wallet, that's when change happens. That's why unions and strikes really worked. There was a whole meat strike in New York in the early industrial revolution, where all the butchers closed down, and they stopped buying meat from the stock, which started charging them more prices. So they weren't making hardly any money. In fact, they were losing money. So all the butcher shops closed down, which meant a big backlog in meat, and it was starting to spoil and get really bad. And it was, and these women would go through town and like shaming butchers if they were selling meat. They would go run in and throw all the meat in the street. I mean, people really came together. They were going door to door saying, this is, if you want meat back, this is what we got to do, because it's unfair to you, it's unfair to us, it's unfair to our local butchers. And they all came together, and they won. They beat the system, but they had to do it, and they had to go to those extremes. I mean, of ruining this meat, sometimes violence, but they fucking did it. And we can't do that now because we're so divided, and the corporations know how to do it. They learned from this.
That's
We
how
didn't. They
that
learned from it.
that's how that just happened. It was like last year, 2 years ago, or something like that. There was a vegan that was protesting a butcher shop that was serving meat, and they
Mm.
splattered red paint on the person's window. And what the person did was he took a deer and slaughtered it in front of all these fucking people that were outside protesting. I was just like, I'm not fucking mad, because that's a self-owned business guy. You did the wrong thing. Instead of attacking a corporation or attacking something that you might affect, you attacked a person who's
Mhm.
probably going to be as bitter as you are and do the same exact shit in return. So now you're fighting amongst each other. You don't get anything done.
Right. Exactly. What they should be fighting is the factory farming. That's what the vegans should be fighting, but we get so narrow, and like we a lot of times all want the same thing, but we find that one thing that we're like, well, we're going to splinter off from this. Like we should be
I
fighting the factory farming.
I would agree with you, but I did talk to a rice scientist who also explained factory farming in a different way as also being essential to the growth of her production with dealing with rice. More of a balance, kind of smaller structure, as then we see these other videos where there's animals being like in horrible conditions being slaughtered and stuff. That's a different side of it. It's kind of like when you see the extreme of something and then you see the actual, and you're like, it's not
Right.
as bad as you think. She explained that perspective, which I never even thought of. So I think there's a line to be drawn on all of these things as well, too. These perspectives
Sure.
are important.
Yeah. There's a difference between to me, factory farming and efficient farming. There are ways to be ethical about it, but again, it's that ethical capitalism, ethical consumerism, just letting people do whatever the fuck they want because they can, at the detriment to living creatures, whether us or animals. It's not okay, but we let it happen because we get that dopamine boost of, ooh, buy. If I have these things, I'm going to be happy. If I have these things, my life is complete. It never is, but they convince us it is. And so suddenly we have a bunch of shit in our house that we don't need. It ends up in storage. We completely forget about it, ends up in landfills. I heard, and this may not be entirely true, but I did hear that 60% of the things that are returned to Amazon are thrown into the landfill because it costs less to do that than to reshelve it and resend it. I'm like, well, fuck. Like it's Amazon's a whole other story, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole other beast to
You
tackle.
always get
But
serious in
ethical
like the
capitalism.
last moments of the podcast every single time. Last time was Abe Lincoln, and now this time about Amazon.
Oh,
Um,
well, I mean, last time what did we end it with, like cock rings or something? So we could totally end it with that again.
no, we
Or Ball Wizard.
we ended last one with Abraham Lincoln. Um, Carla, do you want to say anything before we wrap up? I got to get going here in a second.
No. I think we're good. I think the thing is, just try not to be an asshole. I think that can be the takeaway for most things. Just try not to be an asshole. Try to make the world a better place, and come and talk on Robbie's podcast.
Or be an asshole and still talk on my podcast.
I mean, that's probably more interesting. If it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yep. All right. Well, Carla,
Thank
thank
you,
you for
Robbie.
joining me again.
Always.
Stay tuned for another episode.